The complaint began with baskets. Most complaints do if followed far enough. Men preferred to say complaints began with doctrine, honor, authority, or a word large enough to stand on a platform. Mara knew better. A complaint usually began with a body waiting too long, a bowl filled too little, a name forgotten twice. This one began with baskets and widows and language again. Pentecost had made language sound like fire. Distribution made it sound like hunger. The Greek-speaking widows did not say they were being hated, not at first. They said their portions came late, then smaller, then with less oil, then through boys who did not know their names. Each statement could be explained. Patterns are where injury learns grammar. Mara saw it before most men admitted it. She saw it in wrists. Widows carrying baskets know the weight of fairness better than judges. A basket held by the handle leaves a line across the palm. Too much weight cuts deep. Too little weight makes the arm rise too quickly, and shame follows it home. Mara saw one woman lift her basket and smile with her mouth while her wrist told the truth. "Dagon," she said. He looked up from arguing with Yos over whether watching a doorway included watching one's own hands near figs. "What? Come. I am teaching." "He is stealing." Yos said, "Learning. Both of you come." They came. The distribution room was a courtyard borrowed from a family whose generosity had become increasingly nervous as need wore paths into the floor. Baskets stood along one wall, bread under cloth, oil jars, lentils, dried fish in smaller amounts than promised, names scratched on bits of potsherd by men proud of their system because it looked like order from above. The courtyard had a fig tree against the back wall, the leaves the new pale green that has not yet turned dark enough to be useful for shade. The morning sun was slanting in at the angle that finds dust before it finds faces. The air carried the smell of flatbread that had been baked 2 hours before and was no longer warm, and the smell of women's bodies in numbers, soap and sweat, and the small private smells of nursing mothers and old grief that did not wash out of cloth no matter how many times the cloth was beaten in the stream. From below, it looked different. Women waited in 2 clusters that pretended not to be 2 clusters. The Hebrew-speaking women stood closer to the baskets and farther from the oil jars. The Greek-speaking women stood closer to the oil jars and farther from the baskets. Neither cluster had decided this. The pattern had set in the way ruts set in a yard floor by the small repeated tracks of bare feet over weeks. The Hebrew speakers had been here longer. The Greek speakers had arrived in the months since Pentecost from the diaspora cities. Both clusters had widows in them. Both clusters had women in their 30s who had lost husbands to fever, to road, to Roman procedure, to a Jewish-on-Jewish disagreement that should not have produced a body but had. Both clusters were tired and hungry and trying not to look hungry, because looking hungry in front of other hungry women was a kind of cheating. Each cluster spoke in its own tongue and in soft tones. Dagon could hear the difference without understanding either fully. The Hebrew-speaking cluster carried the long-shaped vowels of women who had grown up in the country and learned to negotiate with butchers, mothers-in-law, and shepherds for 40 years. The cadence of a tongue that expected to be answered in itself. The Greek-speaking cluster had the shorter clipped vowels of coastal cities. Alexandria sat in the throats of 2 of the older women, Antioch in 3 of the younger, Caesarea in one with a sharp accent who folded her arms when she was not lifting them. The Alexandrian women had the slight rounding on their omicrons that the synagogue at the harbor there had used in liturgy for 200 years. The Antiochians spoke a Greek that had passed through Aramaic on its way to their mouths and come back faster. None of these women had ever pronounced Hebrew except in prayer. None of them had been taught they should have to. Dagon caught one phrase in Greek, aukemnes, he did not remember me, and another in Aramaic from across the courtyard, lo amrat shemi, she did not say my name. That was the first bad sign. People who are truly one body do not arrange themselves like suspicion unless something has taught them to. Mara walked between them without greeting anyone too warmly. Warmth had politics now. Dagon followed and felt useless, which was one of his least favorite honest sensations. "Ask her name," Mara said, nodding toward a small woman near the back. "Why me?" "Because you know enough Greek to be less insulting than the boy with the tablet." "High praise, earn it." He went. The woman looked at him as if he were another delay wearing sandals. Fair. He asked her name badly. She answered sharply. He repeated it worse. She corrected him. He repeated it again. This time she nodded once. Names first, Dagon thought. Bread second. Or maybe they were the same thing. Her name was Thecla. She was thin in the way coastal women got thin in cities, not the thinness of working hunger, but the thinness of having had no fish to cook with for too many months in a row. Her cheeks were drawn, but her hands were still strong. Her left hand had a small permanent stain at the base of the thumb, the color of old dye, the mark of a woman who had worked with cloth all her young life. She wore a headcloth pinned with a single bronze pin that had been her mother's, and the pin was bent slightly where it had been straightened too many times in too many cold mornings. Her eyes were the kind of gray-brown that Greek widows often had, light enough to register surprise, dark enough to keep grief private. She had been in Jerusalem 6 months. Her husband had died after bringing them from the coast for reasons Dagon did not understand and she did not explain. She had a sister's son somewhere near the market who sent help when he could and shame when he could not. She had received bread that morning hard enough to fight back. Dagon told Mara. Mara looked at the bread pile. "Show me." Thecla did. The loaf was not rotten, not obviously neglected. That made it worse. It was the kind of lesser portion that could be defended by anyone who did not have to eat it. Mara called for the boys with the tablets. While she waited, she picked up one of the potsherds from the basket nearest her foot. A broken jar's lip, the curve of it polished smooth on the back from the boys' thumbs rubbing as they read. Hebrew letters in careful young boy script across the front, the kind of script a father teaches in a yard at 6 and corrects again at 9. Mara read it aloud, slow, Tikla. She turned the sherd toward Thecla. "Is this you?" Thecla bent her head over the clay. She looked at it for longer than reading required, long enough to feel the 3 months of misnaming in her hand. "Thecla," she said. "Theta, Eta, Kappa, Lambda, Alpha." "Tikla," said the taller boy with the tablet when he arrived, already defending the spelling because someone had begun examining it. "Theta," said Thecla. "Atav." The boy looked at his tablet. Hebrew had no theta. Hebrew had no proper sigma either, no upsilon, no phi. His father had given him an alphabet of 22 letters, and the names walking into the room were arriving with letters his alphabet had no chairs for. He had heard Thecla attempted it, settled. The clay had borne her misname for 3 months. She had received bread under it. They arrived defensively. Boys learn from men quickly when accused by women. "Who counted this line?" Mara asked. "We counted all. That is not an answer." The taller boy looked toward a man near the oil jars. Good, fear points. The man was named Eleazar. He was not cruel, which made him harder to correct cleanly. Cruel men are simple. Eleazar was tired, sincere, overtasked, and convinced sincerity should protect him from being examined. Dagon had met many such men. He had been one in his own darker way. Mara approached him. "The Greek-speaking widows are receiving less." Eleazar's face closed. "No, yes. There is confusion, many names. Yes, some arrive late. Yes, some do not understand when called. Yes, then you see, I see reasons, I do not see excuse." Eleazar looked at Dagon as if hoping manhood would rescue him. Dagon raised both hands. "I am here to mispronounce names." Mara did not smile. Eleazar said, "We are doing the best we can." "No," Mara said. That word stopped several conversations. "You are doing the best you can without changing who counts, who speaks, and who checks the baskets. That is not the same." The courtyard grew quiet enough that the street outside sounded rude. Apostles were called. Not immediately. First there was argument, then denial, then 2 women speaking at once in different tongues and both being right enough to make translation painful. Then Yos proving his usefulness by running fast and only stealing 1 fig that Dagon saw but chose to treat as wages. Peter came with John and others. Stephen came too. Dagon had noticed him before but not closely. Some men enter a room by taking space. Stephen entered by attending to it. His eyes moved first to the women waiting, then to the baskets, then to the men defending themselves, then to Mara, whose face told him more than the room wanted known. He was Greek-speaking or spoke it well enough that Thecla's face changed when he addressed her. That mattered. Dagon watched the change and understood again that Pentecost had not solved language. It had judged the community by it. Peter listened. This was one of his strengths when he remembered to use it. The complaint was laid out, not perfectly. Complaints never are. Pain arrives with extra words and missing ones. The apostles conferred. Some thought the teaching work was being pulled into daily distribution too deeply. Some said distribution was teaching if bread was involved. Mara said nothing, which meant she had already spoken enough for the truth to stand without her pushing it over. Finally, Peter spoke. The community needed trusted men, spirit-filled and wise, to oversee the work, not because the work was beneath the apostles. Dagon watched Peter closely at that. Peter seemed to know the danger. If he made bread lesser, the room would rot. If he tried to carry every basket himself, the word would thin. So he did something Dagon distrusted in leaders and loved when it worked. He admitted the structure had to change. Names were named, Stephen among them, Philip, others, Greek names, many of them. The courtyard breathed differently, not healed, not yet, but heard. Thecla received her basket again before sunset. This time Stephen carried it. Not because he was above carrying, because he was not. He said her name correctly. She corrected his pronunciation anyway because mercy does not remove personality. Dagon liked her. That night Mara's feet hurt badly enough that she hid it. Dagon noticed because marriage had improved his eyesight against his will. He brought water. She looked suspicious. "For your feet," he said. "Why? Because if you fall, the whole kingdom will miscount widows by morning." "That is almost kind." "I am improving." She let him wash the dust from her feet. The child slept near her hip. Yos slept near the door because he had begun appearing wherever food and danger intersected, which was most of their life now. Outside, Jerusalem argued with itself in several tongues. "You did good," Dagon said. Mara leaned her head against the wall. "I did necessary. Same, not always." He dried her feet with the edge of a cloth too worn to deserve ceremony. "Do you think it will work? For a while, that is your hope. That is most governance." He laughed softly. She looked toward the courtyard beyond their room. "The women will know first if it fails. Then listen to them first." "Yes, will the men?" Mara closed her eyes. For a while. He understood why that had to be enough and why it was not enough at all. The next day, Stephen stood in the distribution courtyard with sleeves rolled and a tablet in one hand. His forearms were the forearms of a man who had grown up doing some work that involved lifting on his side of the country. Not a farmer's tan, not a carpenter's scars, but the broad, easy strength of a man who had loaded ships. His hair was cut shorter than Jewish men in Jerusalem usually wore theirs. He had a small scar across the bridge of his nose where something had been broken once and set well. He did not look like a man promoted. He looked like a man who had discovered the weight of names. Dagon brought him water. Stephen accepted it. "You are Dagon? Depends who is asking." "Mara's husband." A safer answer. Stephen smiled. "She sees clearly." "Cruelly, yes, clearly. Often the same." Stephen looked toward the widows. "This is holy work." Dagon waited for the part that would become foolish. It did not come. Stephen continued. "That is why it must be counted."